You are listening to the Break Time Tech Talks podcast, a bite-sized tech podcast for busy developers, where we'll briefly cover technical topics, news snippets, and more in short time blocks. I'm your host, Jennifer Reif, an avid developer and problem solver with special interest in data, learning, and all things technology. After an international trip last week, I am still playing some catch-up and diving into a ton of new things. While there weren't major epiphanies on any one particular thing this week, I do have several irons in the fire, if you will. So I'll share what I'm working on and the successes and or roadblocks that I'm hitting. First off, I want to give a huge shout out to the Glasgow Meetup where I spoke last week. This was a really great event, and it was a great group of attendees with a little bit of an unusual venue. There were lots of venues that fell through before the event, so the organizers were scrambling a bit. I felt really sorry for them trying to pull things together when the venue kept changing and falling through on them. However, what they ended up with was a really nice space. It had a nice drink service and plenty of room. It was a very long room, but not as wide. You could tell this would have been really well set up for things like professional or personal parties and fun, fancy events. However, the speaker accommodations were a little bit unusual. They were up on a platform and off to the side. It felt a little bit awkward for me to stand so far above the audience, so I had to plug in my laptop up and up to the right, a few stairs up, and stand kind of behind this wall. You could tell it was meant for a DJ, where it's supposed to hide the operator. I'm a relatively petite person, so with that kind of large wall, me being up so high, it was a little bit hard for me to see over the edge of it and just for people to see me. There also was an LED screen, which was really beautiful. I was really excited about it, plugged everything in, but I realized later on that it actually was a little bit hard to read code from it, especially for anyone sitting in the back of the room. We fiddled around with the screen display resolution and the font sizes and things to make that a little bit easier. A little bit of a hurdle there, but we managed it and it worked pretty well after that. There also was no Wi-Fi, so had a few little hurdles to try to find a roundabout way. We were able to get some connection set up and going, and I was able to do the demo. It just took a little bit of finagling and adjustment on my end to get everything working. Then there was a handheld mic. Now, I've seen lots of venues that have this before where there's no mic stand or there's no lapel mic. Not a huge ordeal, especially if you're just working from slides. But for someone who live codes quite a bit, that gets rather tricky to try to project my voice to the back of the room while I've got both hands on the keyboard trying to type and talk at the same time. Thankfully, I had an amazing colleague who acted as my mic stand and helped me continue moving through the presentation while he held the mic so that I could get my code written and both hands on the keyboard. All in all, the event was quite an adventure, but we made it in the end. I am incredibly grateful to attendees and organizer for putting everything together. I would definitely go back in a heartbeat as well. The organizers fantastic and the attendees were all attentive and interested. It was a great event. As advocates, though, this is a great lesson that I had planned and have dealt with many of these challenges before, but it's always entertaining afterward, of course, to see what ends up cropping up during a live event. With battling some of these things, I have the attitude that I will prevail in the end. Sometimes you just have to fight for it a little more than others, but that's all right. Overall, still a great event and hope to go back in the future. The other things I've been working on this week is that I've been playing around with Quarkus and loading in unstructured data to Neo4j, doing some ingestion and then some retrieval on there. I'm trying a few different filtering approaches and I haven't had a lot of success yet. I think it's just a matter of aligning the data structure, the data model, if you will, to the retrieval strategy, to the ingestion piece, and making sure all of those sync up well. And I just haven't found a good fit for all of that yet. I might need the combination of RAG and text to cipher. Right now, I'm just working with plain RAG, but I'm playing around with some more of the filtering things with RAG before I dive into other options. I'm also trying to figure out a good structure for the data model before I even ingest it, basically how the model will look once I do the ingestion. And then right now it feels very disjointed. This seems like a good case for naive RAG right now, but there are a few things also that I would like to add the relationships and the connections to hopefully use later on down the road. There are I'm also wanting to combine this naive rag with a live interaction tracer, which is definitely a great graph use case. That's why I've left all of the data in the graph for right now. I'm still fine tuning how this live interaction tracer is going to work, but we are starting to make some progress there. I hope to have some more tips and thoughts on this approach in the near future. There's also been a lot of random meetings with folks just wanting to kick off projects or events. Is anyone else feeling this as well with the start of the year? We are now late enough past January 1st that everyone's back, but not late enough where people are quite heads down yet. So there's a lot of planning phase and strategizing and kicking off projects. So I've just ended up with a lot of meetings dropped into my schedule to talk about future events or projects or things that we want done this year. There should be some really fun and interesting things, though, coming out of these, so I will keep you posted on that. For the content piece for this week, I read a blog from Will Lyon, which, if you've been around this podcast, you know that he actually was my guest in last month's podcast, or one of the podcasts last month. And he recently came out with a blog talking about context graphs. And if you've been around the AI space or keeping up with the latest and greatest, this is a topic that has come up relatively recently and is starting to make a splash in the industry, this idea of context graphs. And Will Lyon wrote a blog post about how context graphs and Neo4j work together. It's called Hands-On with Context Graphs and Neo4j. First off, the blog starts walking through what is a context graph and why it matters. I'll give a short little definition here and then continue on. But traditional databases have done really well at capturing a snapshot of data in time, but they don't really tell you how and why that data got there. Context graphs can help document the how and why of those decisions so that you can understand why the data looks the way that it does. This can be really powerful for AI, especially because AI doesn't understand and can't really read between the lines to get the underlying context behind those decisions. Context graphs can help provide that tacit knowledge, the implicit human-held information in our brains or business rules or whatever it might happen to be, and add that information to the data. The blog post steps through an example of a credit line increase for a customer, whether you should approve it or not approve it. And the example here is that it can go through and do a customer search, calculate risk score, look at the employer and the risks there, any recent transactions, and figure out the decision and then record the basis of that decision. Hey, we are rejecting this customer's credit line increase because of these particular reasons, and documenting all of that. This is something that previously you would have built an application or a system, and then an SME would have been required to come in and read the code and analyze and then convey, hey, this is why we made these decisions, or there would have been maybe documentation or notes to say, here are the business rules that we used for this calculation or for this logic. But it's never really been possible or considered until now to start documenting these things. But because now we have an AI, we need some way to provide those business decisions and that logic and that SME knowledge to an external source that's not human-to-human communication. And this is where something like a context graph can help provide and fill these gaps. It's a way that you can document the decisions, the processes, the logic rules that go into why did we choose this and how did this customer end up with a credit line rejection at this point in time. You can also document things over a long course of time, right? Because you can look at decisions over time and say, well, now this customer has actually improved their credit score. They've been a long-standing good citizen, etc. And now we can actually approve that credit line increase down the road, even though we couldn't back then because of XYZ reasons. Now those reasons are no longer valid. Now we can approve this credit line increase. So even just things that change over time, you can document all of this in a graph and follow that path and that journey for understanding when and where and why a customer might have access to some things and not to others. There's also lots of other cases for context graphs, but this was just one that I think is really relevant and makes sense, that previously you wouldn't have access, or you wouldn't be able to understand the decisions that went in behind that logic without an SME present. And now we're actually documenting this in the database itself using context graphs. The blog post walks through a solution architecture, some of the technical details, including things like the algorithms that were run and the data model and so on, and then also provides a demo with links that anyone can go out and replicate the demo application and play around with it, or just go directly to the hosted rendition of the demo app and look at and understand how context graphs work. This was a busy week, but I'm super excited to see where this month and 2026 is taking me, just with all of the projects and things that are spinning up. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of interest and lots of things to work on. I will keep you posted. As always, thanks for listening and happy coding.